Drum roll. So we are running up to the 100th episode. Woohoo! This is your werewolf speaking. We are currently flying at 12... No, sorry. I am afraid this episode, like the previous three, brings together episodes from the past, so it's not really standalone as many others are. Sorry. Of course, you have the choice to go ahead with this one, but it might not make that much sense if you do. I just want to get on with it, though, and not take another half an hour explaining what has happened over 90 fucking episodes, if that's okay. Having said that, you new listeners, I've kind of put you off, haven't I? I didn't mean to put you off. I just, it's like it is as it is. If you want to follow the show on Twitter and Instagram, there are links in the description. If you want to join the group of beasts on Facebook, then there again are links in the description. To those beasts, I send my thanks. So, with no further ado, here we go and dive back into the nonsense, which is this werewolf's life.
12 dongs. 12 dongs. When the clock ticks 12 o'clock that day, there's 12 dongs.
Shower done, crevices cleaned, dried, powdered and buffed. I was ready to find out what the fuck I was in for in the kitchen. I tried to work out what the fuck was happening while in the shower, but ended up so confused and with so many possible outcomes that I just thought, fuck it. I put on my relaxation outfit for home, a white t-shirt and a pair of crisp, unbleached blue Levi 511s. I know, not my usual suave wear, but I was dressing down. I was supposedly at home and should be able to relax because of that. Fen had stayed in the bathroom with me. That was strange. I could sense that he was nervous, which was even more stranger than that. His feeling anxious made me feel anxious, which was stranger for me, as he had never made me anxious before by being anxious because he had never been anxious, which was stranger. Sorry, never mind, it was unnerving. Making my way to the kitchen, I was utterly unprepared for what would happen. As you know, I try to live by the werewolf rules of life. Well, my werewolf rules of life. Number one being, do not care. It is the best way to be when making life-changing decisions, to not care about the outcome if you cannot all help it. Going clueless and being a wise ass has got me this far without being dead. So to me, it seems to work. I sat at my table with the two Russian gentlemen as a more nervous Malcolm did a commensurate disappearing act at once. Once I looked at him as he did his runner with a brief eye contact and a nervous nod. In those few milliseconds of eye contact, I said a lot with the man. Much was about how unhappy I was, that he let these people into my home without my permission. I can convey a lot of information with just my eyes. I think it's another, superpower linked to my werewolf background. I think. I don't know, but I think. Sally came and sat down, food in hand and food in head. She had a glass bowl with some of my favourite pistachio nuts in it. These were ordered from America and quite difficult to source and very expensive, which was, well, a bit annoying to be honest, but that was Sally's job, was it not? To be a bit annoying. She was yet again stuffing her face with food. This seemed to be a common thread in Sally's life, much like Brad Pitt in most of his movies. She always seemed to be eating and talking. How she wasn't a fat werewolf was somewhat of a conundrum to me. As she took a seat, she placed the bowl she had down on an overly carefully laid coaster, whilst maintaining eye contact with me, and sarcastically checked the bowl from every angle, making sure that it was equidistant from the edge of said coaster before she was comfy and sat back, popping another one of my pistachios into her mouth and fixing her eyes on mine. Sally was a sarcastic little douchebag, even without speaking. This whole thing better be worth this intrusion into my life. Who would be the first fucker to die was running through my head. How many could I get before it became a fight? retaliate first and all that shit. Rule 2 of my werewolf life. Through her half-chewed pistachio nuts, she began talking while covering her mouth to hide the nasty sight of her masticating.
Hi. I've been chosen by the family to speak to you about something very important to them. You know who I mean by the family, yeah?
Oh, I was really angry. I was sat ready to get across the table as fast as possible. My palms were placed downwards on the table, and I was raring to go. I felt Fen was also prepared to go. I actually love this pre-murder sensation. Confrontation is so cool. I nodded at Sally and briefly looked at the two more Russian men sitting at my table.
This is Koshi, who you've met before, and this is Alaric. They've been sent as 2 trained members to help in these discussions.
She said, indicating the man that I recognised.
Because you know him, and he says he likes you. He also has all the information we need to do the task required if you decide to help. He likes you.
She laughed. Her tone was sarcastic. Nice. I would remember all this when I was killing her.
Alaric, because...
She looked rather confused.
Why are you here, Alaric?
She said, turning towards the man. I am the best tracker in tribe and can drive van, the man said.
Fair enough.
She said, smiled and continued with her current spout of shite.
Right, well, I know you do not like to chat with people in general, so we will get right to the point. We have a werewolf problem, and before you get all arrogant and vain, it's not all about you.
Again, the cheeky little shit smiled at me. This belittling was all being noted for future use. She selected another pistachio from the bowl and dropped it into her mouth. She knew that she could irritate the fuck out of me by taking her time and drawing this whole thing out. She saw me ball my hands into fists on the table and laughed as she really enjoyed my discomfort.
Be nice to Will. He's getting all stressed, poor man.
Azza the great white wolf chimed in. She would be smirking if a wolf face could carry a smirk. These two made a fucking devastating team when together.
Sorry, Will.
I smiled. Her eyes fell to the table where she ran a fingertip across the wax finish.
It is some other hairy twat who's causing the crew issues,
she said, popping another nut into her mouth.
The problem with this one is that we keep killing the humans that the posit is linked to. But it's never the humans that are the problem. It's the dusha that's inside that's the issue. As I say, humans we can kill off. But these fuckers keep on trucking, as you old folks say.
She pointed at Fence. Why have you not killed me then? I asked, a little bit smugly.
Well, to be honest, Will, you might be a cunt, but Fenrir's awesome, and for some unknown reason, he loves you, so he would be upset if we killed you.
Fuck, I would. That's the rest I need, sent Fen as we looked at each other.
They want Fenrir back in the tribe. They know that you will eventually do something so stupid that you will die, and then they might get a better, how do you put it, host for him, that they may be able to re-socialize. So they're just playing the whole waiting game. And as people like Koshi and Alec are hundreds of years old, they can play that game very well.
I was nodding along with all this because it was a fact. Even though Fen pretended that he hated me, I knew we were best friends. We could be. Harumph came into my head as he read my thoughts. Why are you here then? Why are you there, spokesperson? I asked.
Well, Azza...
She pointed at the white wolf snoozing on the kitchen floor.
And me are probably the only thing that you have ever come close to almost caring for. So they thought we should ask.
She told me. She smoothed her ginger locks back, pretending to be all seductive and stuff.
Because you love us.
She laughed, as did the white posit in my head. Bollocks, I do. Why me? I said.
Why not?
She tried to say through a mouthful of pistachios. I sat in silence for some time. Considering what had been said, I had to weigh things up. It could be a fun thing to do, who knew? I don't think it would be particularly dangerous. It was only one other beast against me. I'd never struggled one-on-one with a werewolf, so that was okay. Downsides? Helping someone out? That's always a downside to me. So, what do I get out of this? I asked.
Well, you would get a sense of achievement and our
Again, she pointed at the posit and herself.
undying gratitude.
I looked at her and the posit and nodded. And? She feigned that she was a little bit hurt.
The tribe could be grateful in many ways. There are vast amounts of cash and power. You could come back into the fold even. All would be forgiven. You could give it a go with us again. Or, this may interest you more, you could just ask us to leave you the fuck alone. What do you want more?
I smiled and sat back in my seat. I was actually enjoying this process. They needed me, and I could be as much of a cunt as I wished. I think to be left alone would be my thing. I'm sick of worrying about them coming and trying to kill me. She nodded.
Well, that...
She began, but I interrupted. I also want a Ferrari F40, please. I smiled. She looked at Koshi, who was now also helping himself to my fucking pistachios. He looked at her, nodded and shrugged.
Well, both these things ain't impossible, although I'm a wee bit hurt.
Again, she massively overacted her hurt as she removed a lock of hair from her face. It might not be that easy. I want a particular F40. It's a bit special. It's a 1989 Nardo Grey 1000 horsepower special. There's only one, and I want it. I looked at Koshi. He looked at Alric. They nodded at each other and turned back to me. Da, he said. Does anyone actually really say da? Anyway, I'm in. I smiled and slapped the table with an open palm. We've got a winner! Okay, who are we killing? Sally suddenly became very serious. She leaned across the table, as though the next sentence should be said quietly. She looked around the room as though checking for eavesdroppers, then looking deeply into my eyes and pausing briefly, she said the name.
Ivan Drago.
She said as we all burst into laughter. It turns out the posit we're after was called Sonst. Sonst was a posit that decided that the tribe was bad and had done all it could to damage them in any way it tried. It had tried to expose the tribe to the public, and only through incredible feats of money had the werewolves been able to limit this whistle-blowing posit. She also had a strange way of working with her humans. She just used them and then moved on. She used them as tools in her work, then she was just done with them, usually getting them to do something horrendous or just leaving them as a empty husk. The tribe seemed to think this was not cricket, as we say over in England, so they had decided that something needed to be done. So research had been done on how the fuck to deal with a wolf soul. They had trapped her and contained her humans, and then she just left them. They couldn't stop the soul from doing what it wanted, and it ran around in their city causing more and more trouble. The more the posit had gotten away with, the more she realised that there was fuck all that anyone could do to stop her. I was strangely intrigued, and honestly, I admired the thing causing all this nonsense. I love horrible shit happening to people in general. I love it even more when those in powerful positions are shown that they're not in control. It kind of makes me moist. Sally and I would go find a way to kill this soul off. It turns out that they wanted me to do two things with them. Apparently in Aberystwyth, of all places, was the Welsh National Library, which held many ancient manuscripts. One of these manuscripts was a book of spells written by some woman of the weird, Bethan Beder, whatever, had written this book in the 1200s with magic spells and stuff. A document covering the book's content mentioned one of the spells. She was a high-born witch, so the book was written in Latin, so the spell of interest was called Lupus Anima Pulveri. For those of you like me who do not have a working knowledge of Latin, it means wolf soul dust. She reported it was used to eliminate a group of cannibalistic folk who lived in Carmarthenshire at the time. The description of those folk was basically a description of the werewolves of the modern tribe. Men, women and children could be the wolf and the wolfman. They lived in a small village called Blath, it's Welsh. You can probably guess what that translates to, Blath. Yeah, unsurprisingly, it is Welsh for wolf. If it were not true, it would be the biggest cliche ever. So it was our job to get that while the other two would get stuff ready to hunt this fucking thing down. Who could not want to go and be part of all this nonsense? It sounded fun, right? So as Sally and I set off down the M62, we listened to good music. Her tastes from our last journey had widely and extensively changed, and we were currently listening to Depeche Mode as though she'd just discovered them. And we chatted while the two wolf souls snoozed in the back of the car. It was just like old times, kind of. She told me what had happened in her parents' house after I left. The regret that she felt about the cowardice she'd shown, and how she thanked me for what I'd done after the thing. She said it had been the right thing to do. She told me she felt fortunate to be able to apologise to me. She also told me that she felt lucky to meet, the wolf soul as her. I was excited like a child for the first time in a long time. I enjoyed Sally's company, and I was yet again getting worried that I would end up caring for it. The next stop was Barla Lake on our way down to sunny Aberystwyth on the Welsh coast. Barla is, it's a little village with a big lake on the way to things. It's one of those places you pass through, and as such has lots of people passing through it. So it can be fun for a serial killer or a werewolf to make some, let's call them, missing persons. I booked 2 bedrooms at the Palais Hall, an amazingly beautiful old Victorian Relais Chateau building, just outside Barla. I booked 2 because I didn't really want to make any kind of assumptions, and to be honest, I really did not know what the fuck the relationship was between Sally Asser, me and Fen right now. Until that came up in conversation, I would respect her and not take any liberties, or in the case of Asser and Sally, chances would probably be the better thing. This was the first time I got to hunt with Sally as my compatriot, and I will go into more detail in a later story about it. Still, it was a fun evening out around the lake, and we ate well that night from the small group of teenage tourists that had thought that it would be, fun to have a small party at the edge of the lake. Classic horror movie stuff. The screams worryingly echoed around the lake that night in the still air. Still, it only added to the night's excitement, and the news that there had been a horrendous animal attack in Barla that night was being bandied around the dining room the following morning while we ate breakfast. Apparently, there was this mad pack of dogs. We continued our journey down to Aberystwyth, I think that's how you say it. I let Sally drive the Defender. She had a heavy, heavy foot, and the knowledge that she was, immortal. Nothing really happened more than that. But yeah, sorry, I nearly forgot. We were stopped by the police, and that was cool. I almost forgot about that. We're on the long straight of the A487 coming out of Brithdale. 3 or so miles of perfectly straight, perfectly maintained road. If you've ever been down it, it's quite amazing. 3 or 4 miles of perfect road that goes into one of the most picturesque valleys you could ever imagine. At this point, Sally was what she said was gunning it, which in my language meant she had planted the accelerator on the floor. We didn't see the BMW at the side of the road until Sally had passed the 100-mile-per-hour point on the speedo. That BMW dropped in behind us, sirens blaring as we blasted past, and Sally looked at me with a non-verbal apology, to which I just shrugged and asked her to pull over. The police officer got out of the car and tidied himself up before making his way to the driver's side of the vehicle. I could see from how he walked that he was going to be a cocky cock who was going to be cocky and cocksure of himself and was one of those twats that loved his job and loved to be a cunt when he did it. He was going to embarrass and humiliate. Finn and I were very excited to see how that would go for him. We were sure that it was not going to go too well. We were sure that it was not going to go well at all. Honestly, we were like two little children at Christmas waiting for a different kind of Santa Claus to arrive to get his present. He got to the passenger door window and knocked on it and motioned in the world body language method to roll down the window, cranking his arm round in a circle. Sally, who had never actually been in a car where you have to crank down the window with a rotating lever, had no idea what he meant, so she stared at him and then at me. I told her what he wanted. He wanted the window down, so she pressed the appropriate switch. I suppose we still use the rotating handle body language because pressing a button could mean anything. Who knows? Right, sorry, I've been told off for going off on sojourns from my plot, even if they are exciting. Apparently they're not. As she let the window lower, we turned off the tunes. The police person pretended to look at his papers on a small clipboard while waiting. He was good at this, building up the tension in the moment, if we cared. Standing there as though we didn't matter, as if we cared. I could smell inside how excited he was. He was going to let this rich cunt get everything with both barrels. He was going to make their life an utter misery. When he turned to the open window, he was met by the stunning blow of the stunning woman before him. I could see he was taken aback, just momentarily, but it only put him off his stride for a second. He leaned forward and asked the usual questions. "Do you know why I stopped you today?" To which Sally replied, "Yes." I loved that. She was being as annoying as him. He wouldn't get his way. He wouldn't get all his way playing this game or this part or anything with this girl. She took on the role of the overly emotional young woman, shocked at what she'd done, and I don't think he realised that she was actually taking the piss. He rallied once he'd seen her, obviously having a vast experience of being a shitbag. I would describe the police officer in great detail, but as you can probably guess, it really wouldn't be worth the time. He would not live that long for us to care what he looked like. "Miss, do you know how fast you were going?" I expected yes. But no, Sally gave him big, watery eyes and told him, "I think I was doing about 85 miles per hour, officer. I'm really sorry," through the tears. Sickening. The guy noted things on his clipboard to not get sucked into those eyes and feel sorry for this poor young girl. Staring at his clipboard, he continued with his part of the conversation. "Let's try 123 miles an hour, ma'am. That would be more like it." It was at this point where he fucked up. He turned to her with a vicious grin that would have suited one of us, to be honest. He asked her to join him and his colleague in the police car behind them to review the video footage. I was asked to stay in the car, but as she walked back to the BMW, Asa, the wolf soul in tow, I positioned the rearview mirror so I could watch what was happening. This was exciting. When they got to the car, he opened the back door for her and climbed into the front passenger seat. Some time passed, and I picked a speck of blood I'd noticed from my nail from yesterday's party. Then it happened. It was like a bomb had gone off in the car. A balloon had burst in the vehicle behind me. A blood balloon, as it was covering the internal windscreen with a splash. I watched as the vehicle shook and the passenger side door opened a crack. There was a moment when a terrified, blood-spattered face looked in my direction. The horror in the man's eyes was incredible. Not such a cocksure cunt now, eh, Sergeant Jones? The next second, something wrenched him back into the car, dragging the door closed. closed. The car rocked violently for a while as screams and then a scream filled the air. Silence, and the rocking of the car stopped. I still had the same fingernail in my mouth. I was cleaning it with my incisors as I waited to see what happened. The back door of the police car opened, and out jumped a very naked, blood-soaked little lithe goddess. She was covered, and I have to say I found it rather arousing, in... Asa, the wolf soul, sat next to her now on the road, and I could hear that they were conversing, but I didn't really want to pry too much. She made eye contact with me in the mirror, and I quickly looked away as though I shouldn't be looking. I was shy. I was like a peeping Tom who'd been caught or something. When I looked up again, she was now leaning into the passenger side of the police car, making some violent gestures in there with her hands. As she did this, she threw things behind her like wires and boxes, and they piled up on the floor on the road. Finally, she turned to me and shut the door to reveal herself in full, bloody, gore-covered glory. This time, I didn't flinch. I couldn't flinch away. I stared at her with my gob open. Her body was... It was flawless. My eyes eventually went up to hers. I know I'm bad, aren't I? And she winked as she walked back towards the car, carrying whatever the mess of wires was. She walked. Just that, but... Oh, a walk. She also never took her eyes off mine. At the halfway point back to the car, she moved her right hand up and took something from behind her back and put on the police-peaked officer's cap at a jaunty angle and posed for a moment for my pleasure, giving me a spine-tingling wink as she did so. Fen and I were that very rare thing, speechless. The next few minutes went a bit downhill. They were nowhere near as sexy as she tried to wipe the blood from her body with baby wipes and towels while standing at the roadside swearing. We were lucky that no one passed us in all this time. Eventually she was dressed and looked as though nothing had ever happened. Once more the Highland princess stood before me. White jodhpurs, long black boots, tight white woolen polo neck. She busted me completely staring at her and did a little turn on the spot for me, giggling. She threw the box and wires from the police car into the boot and ran to the passenger side. This was getting all a bit too much for me. I slowly wandered back, shaking my head, and got into the driver's side. I motioned to the box thing in the boot. She simply smiled and said, "Computer things." I nodded and off we popped. I suppose it must have been like the recordings or something of the policeman. I don't know. The rest of the journey was me driving the car just a little bit beyond its limits. It was thrilling. It was just an exciting hour now until we reached our destination. We arrived at the incredible building that housed the 6.5 million books of the National Welsh Library at lunchtime. As a bibliophile, I love old libraries and those crazy little second-hand bookshops that are just amazing. Something out of like Ish's artwork. So this was very exciting for me. Put on top of the architecture of the building itself, which was beautiful. It was anyway. We rolled into a disabled space outside the building and stepped into the Welsh sun. I love adventures. I was also beginning to love... Anyway, sorry. End of the episode. Thanks for listening. The next episode will be out next Wednesday. I'm sending all my love to all of you people. Go join the Facebook group if you could. You could always share this podcast with your friends. As I said before, they might not enjoy you sharing it with them, but you could try. And I would say love and peace out and all that kind of stuff, but, you know, it's a bit weird, isn't it? Bye!
12 dongs. 12 dongs. When the clock ticks 12 o'clock that day, there's like 12 dongs